menyaksikan. Jadi jangan segan untuk bertanya ya. Kalau ada yang belum jelas, ini ada kami di sini, ada Pak Tanah, ada saya, ada Pak Rizky juga bisa membantu. Jadi komunikasi insya Allah tidak akan menjadi beban. Mudah-mudahan apa yang kita lakukan pada hari ini bisa bermanfaat buat kita sekalian, bukan hanya kami yang berkunjung, tapi khususnya buat peserta. Ada hal yang bisa dipetik dari kegiatan pada hari ini. Saya kira kita sudah mempersiapkan peralatan kita. Kemarin juga disampaikan bahwa kita harus install program Google. Jadi sehingga nanti caranya. Demikianlah apa yang saya bisa sampaikan sebagai pembukaan kegiatan hari kita pada hari ini dengan mengucapkan Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Training saya kita mulai. Demikian, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you, and participants. We are very happy that so many people are here today. We have expected that only a small group will relate when we start some practical training. The room is full. And also the online participants. So, hello to the online participants. This is a very nice group. Today, unfortunately, Mary and me cannot talk in Bahasa. So we will only talk in English. To understand. Yes, I talk very slowly anyway, but we need to force Mary to talk slowly because she is a native speaker, and you know sometimes it's difficult for a native speaker to talk slowly. Very difficult. So before we start with the first part of the program, which will be given by Mary, I first like to remind you that for the second part of the program, yesterday I distributed some USB drives with data that you should copy. Have you all copied the data, or do you still need the USB drives?
Yang sudah dikembalikan. Oh iya, silakan yang sudah.
I have more if you need. Just to give you some orientation. In the first part of the program, the morning session, Mary will introduce you to the Google Earth engine. And I assume that most of you are working with remote sensing data. And when I started to work in forestry during my studies about 25 years ago, when I first met Adam, we were so happy if we can find one satellite image for our own area from NASA. And it was a huge target. If you download one image, the computer will. Today, the situation completely changed. We get a new satellite image every day. So we have really huge data. Some sound problems. The microphone. So today we need complete completely different techniques to make use of this huge amount of information. And the smart way to make use of this data is not to download images, but to upload code that executes on the server. So Mary will today show you how you can use some of the largest computers of the world. Huge centers that we are using today in this room. This is possible only since 10 years ago. But it is also a huge chance for us to get access to these huge archives of data. Then we will have a break, and in the afternoon, or after another break, we will switch to another topic. And I will give a short introduction and maybe also some basic training on QGIS. I know that probably all of you are working with GIS in your daily work. You need to do area planning. And I know that most of you are using SV products. So you are using ArcGIS in many cases. At the university in Göttingen, we switched to open source software already 15 years ago, because the license for ArcGIS is very expensive. And even if it is free for you as a student, for your later professional life, you cannot use the software without the license. I mean, you can do it, but it's not allowed. And that's why at the university, we try to use only open source software. And I hope it will work, that we all install QGIS and that we can have a short introduction on that. I'm not sure whether we can pass through the whole program, because usually it takes very long, but let's see. Okay, Mary, are you ready?
Yes.
Should I hand over to you? Are there any questions from the audience before we start?
Ada pertanyaan sebelum start?
Tadi di obrolan ya bahwa
tadi diobrolan bahwa kalau kita sudah mengcopy ya yang ada di drive itu bagian cepat nanti kita lanjutkan ya. Nanti akan menggunakan open source software gitu ya. Karena ini gratis, mungkin memang kita masih banyak produk yang free ya. Nah, juga masalahnya kan berbayar. Ya. Kalau di luar negeri biasanya ya nggak ada yang kayak gitu ya. Nah, sehingga didorong menggunakan software open source, software gratis. Ini sangat powerful juga ya. Nah, selanjutnya nanti Mbak Mary akan memimpin ya, materi ya. Nanti kita ada break ya, lalu nanti sesi sore juga ya. Jadi pelan-pelan sampai jam 3 kita bisa praktekkan. Oke, Mary.
Thank you, everybody. It's so great to see you all again. I had a lot of fun yesterday, and I'm excited for today. Before I start, my talk is very interactive. So I have a lot of tutorials, and we're going to be running a lot of code and playing around with Google Earth. So I want to check, maybe show of hands, who has Google Earth Engine now. So who has an account and it's open and ready to run some code.
Siapa yang sudah punya akun Google Engine?
Ya.
Google Engine sudah di-install semua?
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. Who does not have an account?
Siapa yang belum punya akun Google Engine, IE, yang belum punya akun? 1, 2, ya, 3.
Okay. In this case, maybe it's enough that you that you work in groups or sit next to someone who has a Google Earth account. I also have one extra login that I created for the national park that they can use.
They work from national park who doesn't have a
Yeah,
program.
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Berhak mungkin Pak Andi ya bisa menggunakan yang udah dibuat untuk LNFP Pak. Ya, tujuannya. Ya.
So I can write it down and you can use that.
Yang gunakan itu kalau belum sudah punya. Sudah ada.
Kalau bisa berkata aja kemudian.
Pakai dokternya.
Hope that you can read that. Yeah, so this is a Google Earth Engine account for the national park. Yeah, so please use it. Yeah, from now on it's yours.
Oh sudah. Tapi yang belum bisa pakai akun ini juga.
Should I share the screen? Okay, welcome to Google Earth Engine and open source geospatial data. Okay, that's okay. Great. So my talk today is organized into two parts. The first part is a general introduction into Google Earth Engine. It's very tutorial based, so we'll already get to write 3 scripts and run them and try them out. And then in the next part, it will get a bit more advanced. So we'll look into the open source data catalog that's available through Google Earth Engine. We'll pick out what we like, and then we'll run some more advanced scripts. All of the scripts are available in the files that you should have downloaded. So there's a folder called Session 3 Google Earth Engine. This has the scripts that we will run today. It also has the data that we will run today. But for those of you joining online, there will be another option if you don't have this data. As long as you have a Google Earth Engine account, you can stick with us, because I'll give another option for those online. And for those who might have problems with the data. For those joining online, it might take a little bit longer because you'll have to type the scripts, whereas everyone sitting in the room has those already that they can copy. But look at you. Okay. Everyone ready to start? Okay, great. Oh, one more point is that I will be running the scripts with all of you. So those online, if you're having troubles to run and type the script, you'll also see me running the code now and get an idea of how it works. Do we need a translation for anything? No? It's okay?
Lanjut aja. Oke.
Okay, so welcome to part 1. This is the introduction to Google Earth Engine. And Lutz gave a great sort of introduction to the history of geospatial analysis And to really say that, 25 years ago, if you were a geospatial analyst, your life, I would guess, was a lot slower, or maybe a lot more challenging and a lot more subject to luck. But I really truly mean it when I say that Google Earth Engine is transforming the field of geospatial analysis. I think I talk about it so much that at this point, Google might as well start paying me for advertising, because I really love it. So what is Google Earth Engine? It is a geospatial cloud computing platform that is open source. So as all of you know, you have an account. That account was free, and that account gives you so many possibilities to run analyses. By just running simple scripts in JavaScript, or modifying ones that already exist, you can run all of them. Sorry, technical difficulties.
Tidak lari banyak dulu, Pak. Masih slide awal dulu.
Oh, you have to start share screen first. Yeah. Yeah. Start again, and then choose the screen. No. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And then now, wait. So. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Ya,
So.
ya.
No. Still no.
Then I stop sharing and
Stop sharing.
Atas hasil.
but then you're only sharing.
No, it's not. Yeah.
While we work out the technical details,
Okay. And right show. Okay. So, okay. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, everyone's ready? Okay, great. Thank you so much for letting me know about the slides. Yeah, happens again. Okay, so as I was saying, Google Earth Engine is a web-based geospatial cloud computing platform. So in comparison to something like ArcGIS and QGIS, you are running this online, and you are coding to run this check, as opposed to clicking buttons in ArcGIS. So it was launched back in 2014, but it's seen exponential increase in use in the past years. And it's truly transformed the speed and the scale of what is capable. I already mentioned the data catalog, and this is one of the striking features of Google Earth Engine. There are 40 petabytes of data available in the cloud. That's such a large number that I don't even know really what it is. But there's a huge quantity of satellite imagery, climate and weather data, geophysical data, anything really that you could imagine. And in the second part of today's talk, we're going to dive in and explore and find what data is interesting for you. What's great about this data catalog is that you don't have to download any of this data to use it and to get useful maps and useful information. You just have to write a line of code, hit run, and there you go. You have the result. There are a lot of possibilities with Google Earth Engine. So many that I couldn't even list them here, but to talk about some of the products that I've created with Google Earth Engine, I've done land cover classification and time series analysis, vegetation mapping, and is also a common thing to do, but really the possibilities are almost endless. You can also use advanced techniques like image compositing, for one example. So instead of running a classifier on a single date image, because of the wealth of data in Google Earth Engine and how fast it runs, instead of classifying on a single image, you can take a composite image, an average of all of the images for an entire year, an entire month, several year period. So the common theme is there's so many possibilities. One of the only limitations that I have noticed in my use of Google Earth Engine is very small, and it's really just in the final map product. So if you want to create a map, print it out, put it on a poster, put it in a report or a publication, this is really one of the only limitations. So you can see here the difference between what the map looks like if you create it and format it in Google Earth, in QGIS, sorry. Yeah, and it was quite nice and quite easy to get all of the pieces that you want. And the resolution was also very high. And then on the other hand, you can see what it looks like if you just take a screenshot from Google Earth Engine. Yeah. So for me, in my experience, that's been one of the differences. So with the work that I've done, I typically use both. So I use Google Earth Engine to get the data, to run the analysis. But when it comes to the final map product, if it's for something official, I still go back to QGIS. But everyone has their own ways. So many of you already know the requirements because you already have your account, which is great. I'll review this for those who don't have an account yet, those here and online, but it's very simple. It just takes a few days and you can do so much. The first step is to create a Google account. The easiest way to do that is to make a Gmail, but you also don't need a Gmail. If you have another email account that's not Gmail, you still can make a Google account. I have the information here and links on my slides in case you want to do this. So once you make your Google account, you have to submit a request for Earth Engine access. This is also quite easy. You just have to put your institutional affiliation and describe how you plan to use the data. The approval process can take a few days, so it's important to do this days before you plan to use Google Earth Engine. Which you all know because you all have it. And then, once you get approved, I've never heard of someone not getting approved, and you can start. All right, so I've talked a lot about Google Earth Engine, what it is, how to get it, but I think it would be nice to look at it now. So for those of you who already have it open, feel free to just take a look and play around, and I'll kind of describe the main features that we have. I'll do this here. All right. So I will switch to my Google Earth Engine for this explanation. I hope that it works with the Zoom projection, everything like this. Let's see. Does everything look okay on Zoom? You can see my Google Earth Engine account.
Ini maaf bagi peserta yang hadir offline dan juga online ya yang tergabung di Zoom, coba matikan mikrofonnya biar tidak ada feedback. Ya. Mary, it is right the delay, yeah. When the online screen, it is not this one.
Okay. Yeah, it should be this one.
Atau Tuhan ini komputer ini ada mikrofonnya nggak? Nih, hidup nggak?
No, it's both closed. No sound, no microphone.
Bukan beda kan? Iya, iya. Ada online screen.
Yeah, it should be this one. But I think we still.
different screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
You said maybe you said the different.
Oh, that's right. I think because you only share the PowerPoint. Yeah. So it's better to share the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever in the screen, PowerPoint or whatever, you will come up with. Yeah.
Yeah, this one.
Just stop broadcasting first.
Stop dulu. Stop dulu.
Oh, I see.
Minimize the browser.
Online yeah, I need this one. That's the one. Yeah, and everything over here. I think you open many things, yeah. Oh, you doing one explain two.
Something confusing.
Yeah, confusing. I think you have to open up it.
I think the second screen is a beamer.
Ah, yes.
So you share the first screen. We did that at the beginning.
Yeah, and this is
What appear in the
there was the first.
yeah, because it is
Just here, yeah. Yeah. So that's a second.
oh, harusnya ada expand. Ya, duplicate. Yeah, that's duplicate. No, I think it will.
This was the secret.
Yeah.
Thank you for your patience.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Komputer dengan layar menjadi.
Ya. Cocok. Oke.
Pas.
Kalau kita mas ya. Oke, sekarang sama. Ya.
Boleh saya cek kamera.
Okay, so we're back, and I think we figured everything out with technical difficulties. And now we're ready to take our first look at Google Earth Engine. So for those joining online, you can see my screen. This is what Google Earth Engine looks like. And we're actually right now looking at my hometown. So to explain where you run things and what happens when you run Google Earth Engine, this area here, you can see with some green, with some red, with text. This is where you type the scripts. So I mentioned that everything in Google Earth Engine is run by typing code in JavaScript or modifying code. This is where all of that happens. So a lot of your time in Google Earth Engine is spent in that box right here. To run your code or to save your code, that happens here. And also to share your code. So all of that happens there. Now, if you look to the right side of the screen, you have the console. You have this section that has inspector, console, and tasks. This is also a very important section. So when you run your code, if there's a section where you're printing something or you're calculating something, when you run your code, this section here, the console, is where this information comes. So if you want to calculate an area, or if you want to make an error matrix of a classified map, this is where that information will show. In the tasks, this is where you can find the status of certain functions that you run, or certain processes that you run. So if you upload data, which we'll try today in the tutorial, this is where you see that process happening. So you can already see finished tasks that I have run, and this was uploading data. So you can see how long it took. You can see the status that it's finished. And then, yeah, you can also see what it is. So this is where you will see the status of uploading data, but also of downloading data. So when you download data from Google Earth Engine, you have many options. You can download it to a folder in your Google Drive, or you can download it to your computer. There are many options. This is where this will also happen. The inspector tab is also very useful. So in this tab, when you're running your scripts, we'll also use it a lot today, you can click anywhere on the map, and this tab will show you what data you have there. It will show you the coordinates. If you have layers, it will show you the value of that layer, like elevation, for example. Yeah. It just shows you what's there. It's also quite useful. Now, if we jump to the other side, you can see another section. Here we have scripts, docs, and assets. In the scripts tab, you have all of the code that you've written and saved. So this is where you save your information. You can see here, I have a folder for Laura Lindu for my PhD work. I created a subfolder for this workshop. And then I have all of the scripts already saved. So at the end of the day, at the end of my workshop, you will also have a folder with the tutorials that we're going to run today. So that's great because you can run them again. You can pick new parts of the world, you can pick new modifications, and you'll have the code. And it will be ready to run. In the Docs tab, this is a really useful part of Google Earth Engine because it has all of the sort of built-in functions of Earth Engine, all of the scripts for running a classifier, for getting a date range, for calculating errors, things like this. All of these pre-built algorithms are there. So when you go to one, for example, we go to classifier, we can go to Smile or Random Forest, and you click on it, it gives you all the information that you need. So for those of you who have Google Earth Engine open right now, I invite you to go into this Docs tab, click around, and see what you find. For this example here, Random Forest, this is a very common classifier for making a thematic map. And you can see here how it should be run. So how should you type it? ee.classifier. And it shows you what you can specify. So you can specify the number of trees with an integer. You can specify the variables for split, the minimum leaf population, bag fraction, maximum C. And it explains what each of those is. Now, it's also important to remember or to note that you don't always need all of these components filled in. There are many default settings, so often it's quite simple to use these docs. In addition to this, you can find really so many resources online with examples of people who have run this code. So it's often quite easy to copy, modify for what you need, and run the code. Then, the last part of this section is the Assets tab. So assets are any of the data that you upload to Google Earth Engine. We will also, one of the tutorials is uploading an asset. So this is where you can put your shape files, your boundaries, rivers. You can also put raster files in here. So this is kind of where it goes. So you can also see, just like before, I have a Laura Lindu folder. Within this folder, I have the Laura Lindu boundary. I have a river file and a sub-district file. So today, you will also have the Laura Lindu folder and then this boundaries file. And then it's really easy. It's so easy to integrate this data into a script for Google Earth Engine. You can see here, you can rename, and then just by touching this import into script, boom, your data is in the script. Easy to call, easy to run, piece of cake. Hey, when you run your script, the map that you see, if you're generating a map, comes out here in the bottom. So this is also something that we'll get a lot of practice with. So when you run a code, you can set where your map focuses to, you can focus how much it zooms, you can add different legends and information, and this is where all of that sort of information shows up. So in the console, you'll have information that you print. So error matrix or calculations, but your map will show up here. The final piece of the code editor that I will explain is this search places and data sets. This is also a very, very useful feature. So here you can also practice, for those of you who have Google Earth Engine open, type something in. Type in elevation, type in Sentinel, and you can see what happens. So yeah, please go ahead. I'll type in Sentinel.
Do you know what Sentinel means?
Right. Yeah, does everybody in the crowd know or is familiar with Sentinel, with Landsat? I can go ahead and explain for those who might not know. Sentinel, and also today we'll see Landsat as well. These are two programs that have been collecting satellite images of the Earth's surface for a very long time. Landsat has been collecting since the 1970s, and in many cases this is the longest running and best data that we can use when we want to assess changes. So if we want to see what has changed over the past 20 years in this particular part of the world, oftentimes we will use Landsat data. So there are satellites that are flying around the Earth and are constantly recording the values of electromagnetic radiation that bounces off the Earth and comes back. And we can use that data to make maps and to assess land use and to do a lot of things. So I'm typing in Sentinel. The Sentinel-2 MSI is really one of the best data sets that we can use as geospatial scientists. It is 10-meter resolution and collects many bands. I don't have off the top of my head the number, but we can explore that also later today, and we will explore that later today. But just to kind of show how useful this search function is, if I go now to the harmonized Sentinel-2 MSI multispectral instrument, and I hover over that information in the search field, and I click import, it automatically gets loaded into the import section of Google Earth Engine. I can give it a name. I can use this variable title in my script. So it's very useful. For now, I will remove that. And when I go back, if we want more information, so what is this data? How do I use it? Where does it come from? If you click on it, you get all of that information. It's really brilliant. So, you get a description, very detailed description of what is in the data set, how do you use it. It even gives links to more information. So if you want an entire handbook, which is probably 70 pages, describing all of the intricacies of the sensors that they use, and the flight path of the satellites, all this information is found with an easy click. The descriptions tab is quite useful, but what's also useful is the bands tab, because the name of the bands is how you will filter this information and how you will run this information in functions or NDVI calculation, things like this. So this is quite useful. So in your script, when you want to map the green band of Sentinel-2 data, for example, you would use this B3 in the function. If we go down, there are also image properties. This is the next tab. And it can also be very useful when you're trying to filter data. So for Sentinel-2, they have some built-in information on cloud cover, for example, and quality, which you can also use to filter, which we'll also do today. So if this sounds a little bit overwhelming, don't worry, because this is in part 2. So in a few minutes, we'll start the tutorial, we'll start coding, we'll start running some data sets, we'll start very basic. So also if you don't have experience in coding and you've never run lines of code, never done this, we're going to do it step by step. Very easy, very basic, but still at the end of the day, you're going to have created very impressive maps, very impressive things, I think. Great. And finally, then you have a tab for terms of use, which you can look at. So how to, if you make a publication, how to give the right credit for this data. Okay, you can also import into your script with this import tab, and otherwise we can close. So that is everything that, well, not everything, but this is a great start to the code editor. Are there any questions at this time?
Bang, ada pertanyaan sampai saat ini?
If not, then let's start coding. Let's do it. Here is a quick overview of the 6 tutorials that I have planned in the 2 parts of today. So here is the capabilities that you're going to have at the end of this session. The first part starts with tutorial 1. So we're going to run that now. This is just running simple scripts. We won't even create a map. All we're going to do is test out how to print information to the council, the difference between some data types. This is very important in coding. So is it text? Is it a number? Is it a number with decimal? Is it a date? This is all very important information that as you advance in your coding career, if you don't know it, it can cause headaches later. Typically, if you try to run a code and it doesn't work, there's an error, it can often go back to these very basic things, just a typo or just the wrong data type. So I think even for people who are more advanced at coding, it's always a great reminder. Go back to the basics. You know, keep it simple, start from the beginning, go slow, and then we get there. The second tutorial is to create a simple map with some of the data that we have available in Google Earth Engine. And this is also, these 2 tutorials will be no problem for anybody joining online. You should have enough time to type the code. For those of you sitting in the crowd, I can show you how to access the scripts that already exist. The third tutorial is going to be uploading and visualizing data. So for those of us in the room, you can do this with the Lorem boundary, but you can also do this with your own boundary. So if you have your own study site, your own shaped files that you want to run these analyses on, upload those. And this is also the brilliance of Google Earth Engine. You can take the same script and run it for a new place, and immediately you get the information for a new place. So if you are working with 10 different study sites, you can take the same code, just change the shape file or the asset that you're running it on, and you get the same result. It's really great. Yeah, and for those joining online, feel free to use a shape file or a boundary file that you already have, and that is interesting to you. That's part 1. So, not too bad. Part 2, which will come later, is a bit more advanced, but by doing step by step, it will also be very simple. So, tutorial number 4 is cropping to a region of interest. This is a very simple combination of tutorial 2 and tutorial 3. So now we made a map that covers an entire area, and now we want to crop it to a part of the world that we're interested in. So it will be very simple as well. Tutorial 5 will be the most complex, I think. So this is deriving a cloud-free Sentinel-2 Mosaic. I already gave a little bit of an introduction to Sentinel-2. There's a lot of bands, a lot that you can do with this data, but we will try to keep it simple as well. Finally, tutorial 6 will be to examine global land cover maps. There are many global mapping products that are already available. This is something that I found in my experience. Often we're asked as geospatial scientists to make a map, make a land cover map. And this process can be quite difficult, especially if you've never seen that area or you are not able to go into the field and to confirm what you see. And many times, depending on the scale of the project, it could be enough to just use a global map. So for Lorem and for the other areas that might be interesting that you run this script on, we're going to look at 2 different examples of global land cover products and compare them. See if we like them. Does it work? Does it make sense? Yeah. So that's what we're going to do today. And let's start going with tutorial 1. I will show everybody joining where to get the scripts. So they're available as text files that you should have downloaded from these from the flash drives. Does everybody know where to find them? I can
Tahu
open
gimana
this as an
konsepnya?
example.
Oke, they already know.
Okay. So I'll just show as an example. So here's one of the flash drives that you got yesterday. Yeah. Okay, so in the USB drive, there were two folders, session 3, which is this session, and session 4, which comes in the afternoon. So if you just open the session 3 folder, you see text files with all of the tutorials. So for this one, you would just click it, you can copy it, and then paste it in. And where you paste, I'll show just now. So we can work through it together, but at least that's how we can run things today. So we'll copy paste, make some modifications, go through slow, and then we have it.
Kalau di Zoom, bekerja dia buka file script tadi tutorial, tapi kalau di sini tidak tampil. Nah, different.
Oke, oh. Jadi ya yang ini tidak tampil.
Iya. Untuk di Zoom tampil. Untuk dilihat di Zoom tadi tampil, tapi peserta di sini kita lihat apa tadi yang dibuka. Oh iya.
Makanya it's the difference between the online screen and offline screen. Ini yang ini itu tampil itu?
Enggak.
No.
Tadi open script.
Ya.
Ini di Zoom.
Ya, habis di Zoom.
Oh. Ini yang di sini yang untuk peserta di sini yang
Yang kayak tadi kayaknya masalah itu lagi. Oh, itu only. Ya.
Okay.
Mary, yeah, the problem sometimes it change automatically to PC screen only. It should be duplicate. Ya. Ya. Nanti dikasih tahu aja mas ada perbedaannya.
Okay. Yeah, and thank you for please let me know every time that there's some. Okay. So, at this point, you should all see a screen like this, or at least the general screen. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do is create a new script. So, the way that you do that is to be in the Asset tab with New. No, sorry. The Scripts tab, New, and File. But if you want to create a folder where you can organize all of the tutorials, I think this could be a great first step, actually. So let's go ahead and do that now.
Ini dari sini sih saya coba.
Bapak kita tidak apa-apa dengan
Udah nol. Suara naiknya dimatiin. Suara speakernya.
jadi nggak ada.
Itu disilang aja ini. Ini udah imut nih. Masih kayak.
That's good.
Oke.
Okay. So this is what shows up when you go to make a new folder. If you have several tabs, like I do, you have to select the right one. In this case, I have an old file for a different project, but I need to make sure that I'm in the Learn and Do folder. And then I can create a second folder. So I'm going to call it And for all of you, you could just call it GEE workshop, whatever you like to call it. Whatever makes sense to you. For me, I'm calling it workshop running because I have another file already with all of the tutorials. But here we go. Okay. So when you create the new folder, you can see it here. And now we can create our first new script. So click new again. Go to file this time. And again, you have to set the path. Where do you want this file to go? So for me, I have to change to the path do. Then you create. Now for me, because I have multiple layers, you can see it popped up here. And yeah, so let's say that you create a new script and it doesn't show up where you want it. So yeah, you can see I have it here, but actually I want it in the workshop folder. Very easy to fix it. Just pick it up and drag it where you want it to go. And now you can see it's in the correct folder. And here it is. Blank sheet, endless possibilities. Okay, so now what you can do is take the text file that has tutorial 1, copy it, and paste it in. So I'll also show that. It looks big, but we're going to go step by step. So, I copy. Yeah, Control C. Control V. Yes.
Tutorial 1.
Yep, if you find the file will be in the folder that you copied, Session 3, Google Earth Engine, and open datasets, open source datasets. Open tutorial 1. Okay. Text file. So highlight highlight the whole code. Go all the way down. Okay. Highlight. Control C. And then paste it. I want to give a quick shout out to anybody joining online. I will indicate as I go which parts of the script you have to type. So the first look. Oh.
Still copying, still
Okay. Please take your time.
You have to be right. Ya, buka file text satunya, lalu Ctrl A untuk ini, long, Ctrl C, Ctrl V.
let's see how much time will be left.
Yeah.
They are all following you. So to be more slowly.
Yeah.
Most of them is first the beginning. Yeah, so to be.
Mana ada yang kesulitan? Ya, buka file teksnya.
I'm gonna take a
Select all,
walk.
control up, lalu control V. Control V. Oke ya.
Ini paling bawah, dia miring. Ya,
Ya.
oh, oke.
Yeah, I think it's good to check on the what's going on and then wait for
Mary, I already checked this one. Then you can maybe join on another screen. Otherwise we lose.
So yeah, this one down. So I had a chance to go around the room, and it looks like so many of you are in a great place already. Really looks great. I want to, before we run the script, show something that I saw happen with a few of you as I went around. And it's something you have to be careful about with Google Earth Engine. Because if you don't save your script that you're working on, and you go to another script, if you don't hit save, it will disappear. So I'm going to show an example on my screen how this script that I have will disappear. So I'm running my tutorial 1, I like it. It's nice. I want that it stays there. But if I make a mistake to click another script, if I click here, you see what shows up. It says unsaved changes. There are unsaved changes in the editor, and it asks abandon changes. You have an option. You can say yes, or you can say no. If you say yes, then you will lose your script. If you say no, it stays. Okay? So let's see what happens. So if I click yes, if I didn't save my changes, I click yes. Now I'm in tutorial 1, but if I go back to this one, you can see it's gone. And if I had something written, if I write workshop, okay, and I save, now. Now, if I paste this part that I want, same thing. If I go and I click on tutorial 3, and I click yes, I lose everything that I did since I saved. So now, when I go back, you see what shows up is just workshop. None of the new code, none of the changes, nothing besides the last time that I saved. So be very careful with this. You could do a lot of work, spend a whole day making changes, improving. Boom, it's gone. Disappears. So always save your code. Always save your code. So, are we ready to go? Yeah, don't forget to save. So already, I would say what you pasted in, already saved. What is a bit funny is even if you put a space, so here, I put spaces, which visually do not make a change, and functionally also don't make a change. But when you see this little star on top, that means that you have made changes and you should save. Well, if you like the changes that you made, you should save. If you made a mistake and you think that you messed up your code, don't save, because you'll overwrite what worked. One more part about saving. If you are testing out a new method, you're writing a new script, you're making changes, and it's a bit experimental. So you're having fun with it. You're writing new things. It's really good to save multiple versions of the same script. So if you make a mistake, if you break the code, you can always go back.
Bisa dipahami ya. Jadi kalau ada perubahan dia ada tanda asterisk di atas. Ya. Jadi kalau tanda asterisk ini harus simpan sebenarnya. Ya. Itu artinya makna tanda asterisk. Kalau tadi ada sesuatu yang tidak bisa diketahui kesalahannya lebih baik, jangan dilanjutkan, dekat keluar dulu. Kalau sekali tahu tahu ada kesalahan, tapi kita tidak bisa menemukan kesalahan itu, ya lebih baik buang aja. Jangan simpan. Versi lamanya pakai. Itu penting.
Hey, we are ready to run. Well, okay, almost. So if you look at the code that you pasted into the code editor, you see a lot of green, right? If we scroll all the way to the bottom, you see the majority of the script is green. Now, when you do coding, there's a way to add text and add descriptions and add information to your code without running something, without generating a result, but just to give explanation. When we do this, it's called a comment. So what I did as much as possible in this tutorial was to add comments, to add description, information, so that you know what's happening, you know why it's important. So one way to do that, the main way to do that in Google Earth Engine is with this backslash. So you see a lot of the code has the backslash. So we're going to run the code as it is now. Go ahead and click run. If you remember, run is here in the top right corner. So you can click run.
Bisa dipahami?
Yes.
Bisa ya? Jadi yang penting itu pada saat ini sesungguhnya ini kan bahasa coding ya. Ini kan bahasa coding ya. Yang miring double itu artinya kita bisa mengganti keterangan. Ya, keterangan supaya kita paham ini tentang apa sih gitu kan. Itu bebas. Ini pakai bahasa Indonesia juga boleh. Ya. Jadi kalau yang real tidak scriptnya adalah yang tidak ada scriptnya. Ya, tidak dapat itu dalam terminologi dari kata Jawa.
For those online, all that I ask you to type is this right here. So for those joining online, type the word print, P-R-I-N-T, add a parenthesis, a quote, type welcome to Laura Lindu, close the parenthesis, and put a semicolon for those joining online.
Nah, itu sudah mulai dengan bahasa programming. Ya, perintah print itu harus seperti itu. Ya, untuk mencetak bahasa welcome to Lindu. Ya. Atau kalau mau pakai bahasa Indonesia juga boleh. Selamat datang Lindu. Ya, itu maksudnya.
Hey, now I ask you to go to the console tab. So you'll notice the console tab, it's not blue anymore, but it's orange. This means that you're doing something there, that you should go there. So let's go there. Now, you see it. Welcome to Learn Hindu. It's there, it works. So, we just ran our first sprint. Congratulations.
Otomatis. Jadi kalau perintah kita sudah benar, itu pasti nanti otomatis akan begitu tampilannya pada saat kita running.
Klik running.
Ya, ini kita akan ketemu gitu, kalau klik run.
Klik run dulu.
Ya.
Ya, kalau saya lihat kan ini bahasa program ya. Kemudian yang saya ketahui ini mirip dengan analisis A.
Sama dengan R, C, segala macam bahasa
rumusnya ada, Pak?
Ya, itu. Kalau menulis untuk mencetak, pasti harus menggunakan print. Ya, itu bahasa Javanya. Ada bahasa basic pakai taruh kita semuanya. Java gitu.
Dan misalnya dimasukkan di sana.
Oh nanti di bawah. Ini salah satu baru print saja. Oh isinya salah satu aja. Ya. Okay.
For those of you who might have already done coding, but in another coding language, Python or R or something like this, this is just a new one. So this is JavaScript. So each programming language has its own syntax, is what it's called, or basically its own language that you have to translate. Just like Bahasa to English, there are differences. There are subtle differences, different ways to type, to call something. So that's the same.
Ya, jadi
Setiap bahasa kan banyak ya, ada bahasa Python, bahasa C. Sekarang yang digunakan adalah Java. Ya, ini perintahnya sudah begitu. Ya.
Okay. So now let's see what happens when we comment this out. So I mentioned the 2 slashes make something that is not run as a code, but just can provide extra information, or you're not running it. So now I will ask all of you online and in the room to type 2 slashes in line 11 that we just ran. So again. So here we are, 2 slashes. And you see it goes from purple, red, and black colors to green.
Ya, jadi kalau teman-teman menambahkan garis miring 2, dia tidak akan berfungsi sebagai program, dia akan berfungsi sebagai keterangan saja, maka warnanya akan berubah dari biru menjadi hijau.
Komen lah, biar kita mudah memahami apa yang kita komentar.
So this is how you comment out a line of code.
Kalau di R kan pakai tanda quiz.
So now, if we look at the whole script, all 56 lines, everything is green. And now, if we click run, there's nothing.
Ya, semuanya sekarang kan berwarna hijau. Maka pada saat kita run, tidak jalan apa-apa.
Okay, now let's try one more thing. Take out the 2 slashes, put it back to what we had before.
Jadi kembalikan coba tanpa garis miring 2.
And now, so this data type that we're running, this is called a string.
Sampai ini yang disebut dengan string. Kalau ada kata kutip.
And a string includes text. So the way that we make a string is with these quotes. And you can see it's text, right? It is a sentence. Welcome to Laura Lindy.
String atau teks.
So when you want to code and you want to write a text, it's a string. When you want to write a sentence or information, it's a string.
Jika ingin membuat kalimat, pada menggunakan string atau.
And we can also change it very easily. So we're not in Lorlindu right now. We are at Tagalog University. So let's change it. Let's correct it.
Ya, mari kita coba strategi Pak.
So erase Lorlindu
Ya, coba dirubah.
and type Tagalog.
Ya, welcome to Tagalog.
Or wherever you might be for those joining online. Now, when we type run, or when we click run,
Ya, jika kita maka akan ditanami.
and this can go with anything. You can write whatever you want in those quotes, and it will show up.
Ya, tulis apa saja ya akan sebuah.
Welcome to Indonesia. My name is Mary. Nama saya Mary.
Wow.
Whatever you want.
Welcome Mary to Tagalog.
Thank you. Terima kasih. So yeah, go ahead and try it out. Try out, type different things, type your name, type your favorite animal, type that you like trees, your horse, whatever you want. Try it out, hit run, play around with it, see what happens. I'll walk around. Hopefully this will also give time for those online to type the code. And yeah, any questions, please let me know.
Ya.
Okay.
Ya.
think we will have a break. Jadi Bapak Ibu ya, kita punya untuk break dulu 10 menit ya. Silakan ada ini enggak?
Ada kopi ya?
Ada ya. Oke, silakan ambil di sebelah sana ya. Sambil yang masih penasaran boleh lah gitu ya. Biar mencoba yang sampai sini. Ya, nanti akan kita lanjutkan setelah 10 menit.
Sometimes you also
like in art, in the sport, at the first time it gets to edit and finally see the result is very good.
There's creamer.
Okay.
I can book that.
Ini pada musdo saja. Kalau saya mau kok. Musdo saja. Musdo saja.
Oh, ya. Baik, biar aja kok nanti.
Tujuannya kemana?
Ini ada beberapa apa? Ada yang tadi yang melakukan
Apa ini kalau ada besar?
apa ada?
I was thinking just while smoking, we should have some video tutorial in the same style. Oh, it would be great. So
Tapi kami serta juga
I don't like it. And be careful if you use them. That will be good. Because they are.
now it's our university.
Yeah.
Contract.
Yeah, it's very good. But the expensive. Oke, Bapak Ibu kita lanjutkan lagi ya.
Untuk sesi selanjutnya kita akan move to the next exercise, next tutorial. Tapi silakan sambil makan minum ya, relax.
Yes, so still in tutorial 1, but we're going to move a little bit further down now. So I hope over the break you tested out some different text to run and see in the console. And I hope that you already get an understanding of comments and what commenting out does. So when you comment something out, it doesn't run. We learned how to comment something out with 2 slashes, right? With 2 slashes, it becomes green, and then it doesn't run. There are other ways to comment something out. And I'll be using this way throughout the tutorials today so that we can run piece by piece. Because one of the cards of Google Earth Engine, if you have nothing commented out and you have no sections, it's not very easy to run just a piece of your code unless you comment it out. A very long time, if you do this with 2 slashes, if you have 50 lines of code, 100 lines of code, it takes too long. An alternative to that you can see right here in the beginning of the tutorial. So here, it's a slash, an asterisk, anything in between that you want to comment out, and then an asterisk and a slash. This bottom can be moved, this piece, to wherever you want to stop commenting. That's a little bit confusing, I'll show what I mean. So I'm taking this, removing it with Control X, and now I'm pasting it here. And you can see the whole script turns green. So this is another way to comment a section.
Ini cara lain untuk memberikan komen ya, jadi slash bintang ya, kalau ini lalu di ujungnya sekarang garis 13 itu bintang slash untuk menutup komen ya. Jadi dari garis 5 sampai ke 13 itu setelah komen gitu ya. Ya, tarik bintang.
Okay, so now if I try to run my code, you see, nothing comes up. No more welcome to Deriving. It's commented out.
Bisa dipahami tak? Bisa ya?
Clear?
Jadi bahasa program yang ada tulisan print dari kejauhan ya, karena sudah di blok.
So I put it back. Now I run the code and then we have it again. Okay. The other part is that you can do this multiple times in the script. So here we have it in the beginning. It's actually not commenting anything out. But now you can see on line 14, we have the start, right? We have a slash and an asterisk. And if you scroll all the way down to the code, on line 55, you see the end. You see the asterisk and the slash. So I'm commenting everything from line 14 all the way down to 55. So you can see if I remove these, if I erase it from 14, and I erase it from 55, now we have text. It's not all green. We have red, we have blue, we have black text. Not all green.
Ya, tadi ada bintang ya, dan juga dihilangkan. Makanya semua program yang ada tulisannya file, print, jadi kalau tadi kan semuanya hijau, jadi yang text saja. Jadi komen, di komen itu sih dia akan berfungsi apa-apa. Karena dibuka, tanda mirip sama aktornya itu ya, jika dia bukan menjadi berwarna yang lain, nah itu sudah berfungsi sebagai perintah dalam program. Seperti print, variabel, print, semuanya.
Okay, great. So I'm going to put these back in. So I'm undoing that because we want to run things very slowly. We want to go piece by piece. So what we're going to do today is we're going to be taking this start of the code and we're going to move it down. And as we move it down, we're going to run new parts of the code, but a little bit at a time.
Jadi dia akan bertahap ya, prosesnya akan bertahap, makanya membuka tanda listrik ini juga akan bertahap.
Tadi kan dia sudah aktif sama dia punya bahasa programnya. Caranya melakukan itu bagaimana?
Tadi kan ada garis nomor 14 ya. Nah, itu kan masih ada tanda strip asterisk ya. Jadi di bawahnya juga ada asterisk strip. Nah, itu dihapus. Begitu dihapus maka akan dihapus salah satu aja udah langsung kan jalan.
For those joining online, instead of moving this piece down little by little, you should have time to type the code. So you can run it piece by piece in this way. And for anyone in the room who could not copy the script, this can be done the same way. Just type it in, run it as we go. Also, for those joining online, you do not have to type the comments. This might take a long time because I put a lot of information to describe variables, to describe the functions that we use. So, if it's too difficult to try to type all of the information, just focus on the parts of the script that are not green.
Or for participant atau bapak-bapak yang offline, juga online, bisa share file text-nya di next chat. Nah, bisa gitu ya. Nggak ada online bisa. Ya, baik. Main-main.
Okay. So, now to run some more of the script, I'm asking you to take the slash and asterisk, remove it from line 14, and put it on line 26.
Kamu dari 14 ada di belakang ke kanan.
So now you can see that we have some more colors, right? It's not all green. We have another text string that's red, and again we're printing. Now this part of the code I'm using to introduce us to the concept of variables. Variables are very important in coding because it's a way to store information and use it later in a function. So we're seeing exactly what's happening here. The way to define a variable, which is the first way to create one, the syntax or the way to do that in Java, in JavaScript, is with these three letters VAR, var. When you type it in, it becomes bold. So I can show you. If I delete even one letter, it becomes VA, it's not bold, and we get a big red X, which means something's wrong. You did something wrong. Something is mistyped, misspelled, or it doesn't exist. So when we type VAR, it is bold, and then we define our variable.
Ya, dalam bahasa programming itu selalu ada variabel namanya, ya, yang nanti bisa dipisahkan. Nah, ini variabel adalah suatu bahasa programming dari Java, ya, itu nggak boleh ukuran R misalnya, A gitu ya. Kalau ukuran PA tadi ada langsung ini terus ada tanda silang, itu pasti ada tanda salah.
So again, when we create variables, we give them a title or a name, and then you define it. So what does it mean?
Jadi dalam contoh ini, itu ditulisnya test string. Itu adalah nama variabel yang Bapak Ibu definisikan. Ya, apa isinya adalah yang sebelah kanannya. Kita ikutin welcome to. Atau bisa juga menggunakan bahasa lain. Ya, selamat datang boleh.
And what's great about creating a variable is that now, whenever we want to use the information stored in that variable, all we have to do is type test string.
Very perhaps testing not necessarily in English, ya. In bahasa juga. Ya. You type in English test string, itu variable, but they can also use bahasa Indonesia. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Ya.
So
Ya, jadi apa namanya? Itu kan tadi variabel itu nggak boleh dirubah ya, karena itu selalu bahasanya. Makanya itu ada huruf tebal. Ya, tapi yang sebelah kanannya namanya itu boleh menggunakan apa saja istilahnya. Ya, tidak mesti harus test string. Ya, boleh misalnya bahasanya coba tes, boleh.
Ya, harus konsisten nanti namanya itu yang dipanggil kan.
Itu ibaratnya kita sekarang buat nama yang nanti bisa digunakan di mana-mana ya. Di terminologi. Ya. Itu maksudnya.
Great. Now, one quick reminder is that when you're doing coding, one of the most important parts is spelling. Make sure, with coding, you can change the name of the test string. It can be test string, it can be string, it can be Laurel and do, but whatever it is, you have to make sure wherever you want to use that information and use that variable, it has to be spelled the same.
Ya, jadi istilahnya nama itu ya, nama tadi ya misalnya menggunakan coba string gitu ya. Itu nanti apapun isinya, kalau kita copy di mana-mana atau gunakan di mana-mana pasti isinya. Tapi harus menggunakan yang sama, persis yang sama.
And perhaps to remind that it is without space, right?
Yes. Right. It's also important that whatever variable name you want, there's no space in between.
Jadi untuk nama variabel kalau lebih dari satu kata, jangan ada spasi ya, tapi bisa disatukan seperti ini ya. Misalkan judul tabel gitu kan, nah, antara judul dengan tabel tidak boleh ada space. Ya.
So here's what happens if I try to put a space, test space string, we get the red X back. We don't like the red X.
But underscore can use, right? Underscore.
Yes, underscore is good.
Ya, underscore.
Tapi perlu diingat, jangan menggunakan bahasa matematika.
Ya,
Yang tambah,
ya, dan
jangan
operator dan use ya. Plus, minus.
ya, kalau underscore.
So now we can run it. Let's run the script and see what happens. So we created this variable test string, and this variable represents the sentence, welcome to Laurel and do. If we look at line 25, we use this function print, which we used before. If we look at line 11, we also use print. And the text inside was welcome to Tabulato, in quotes.
Ya, bedanya tadi kalau di atas printnya menggunakan langsung tulisannya teks. Nah sekarang kita print di bawah ini menggunakan ya yang sudah didefinisikan tadi yang bar. Ya, dengan hanya menulis tadi test string nanti akan keluar nanti isinya dia tadi.
So now, instead of typing welcome to Tabulato, we put the variable name. We put test string. And now when we run, it does not print out test string. It prints welcome to Laurel and do. And this is why variables are so important, because it's much easier to type test string, especially if you're doing a lot of different things with that information. It's a lot easier than every time typing welcome to Laurel and do. So now, just to kind of show again how important it is that you spell things consistently, if I change this variable name, now it's test underscore string. Now if I try to run the code, it doesn't work. So we get a big red highlight. The console says line 25, test string is not defined. So when you get these errors, a big part of coding is fixing errors. So whenever this happens, go back to the basics. Check your spelling. It's probably a very simple error that broke the code. Not really something big. So when we get an error, we check, we see, oh, misspelled, fix, and then it runs again.
Okay.
Okay.
Ya.
So,
Jelas ya? Okay.
So far, we just worked with strings. So strings are sentences, pieces of information, text, but often in this work, we use numbers, right? So this is a different type of data. And now we're going to look at those and how to define those. So now,
sebelumnya kita berbicara tentang string aja ya, tentang teks. Tapi yang banyak digunakan adalah tipenya dari tipe number. Itu kita akan jelaskan dulu.
Just quickly for those online, all that you have to type to keep up with what we've done so far is line 22. So var test string equals blah, 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 and print test string. Okay. For those in the room, take this comment /*, remove it from line 26, and put it on line 38.
Sekarang hilangkan yang ada di baris 26, tanda striknya, pindahkan ke baris yang 30. Ya, jadi.
So now we have new information.
Jadi sekarang mendapatkan informasi yang baru, ya, baris-baris yang sudah tadi hijau berubah menjadi warna hitam.
Okay, so now we can see a different way to define integers. So integers are numbers without decimals. So this is counting, right? When we count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yes. So not 1.5 or something with decimals, just digits.
Ya, jadi sekarang berbicara tentang bahasa tentang number, tapi dengan format integer. Jadi bilangan bulat, ya, tidak ada koma-koma.
So one important number or type of number where we use an integer is for the year. So we don't say that it's 2022.4, right? It's 20. So on line 30, we are defining a variable for the year. The test integer 1, that is the name of the variable, is equal to 2022.
Sekarang mendefinisikan bilangan integer ya, itu yang ada pada baris 30. Ya, misalnya integer ini integer nomor 1 ya, sama dengan 20. Jadi integer ini digunakan karena bilangan bulat ya, misalnya ini tahun.
You will notice that we don't have quotes around 2022.
Perhatikan tidak menggunakan quote ya. Jadi, tulis saja angka integer. Kalau sebelumnya kan menggunakan quote untuk teks ya. Kalau ini karena angka yang gampang menggunakan.
If we put quotes around 2022, it becomes a string.
Jadi kalau tambahkan quote, maka dia akan jadi teks. Ya, tidak, kalau teks kan nggak bisa dijumlahkan.
But we don't want that. So if you follow it along and you put that in, take it out. It should be blue.
Ya, jadi kalau sudah diubah lagi, maka dia akan jadi.
Okay, on the next line, I defined another integer. This is test integer 2, and I put the value of 3. You'll see what it is later.
Ya, jadi bila integer yang kedua, ya, nilainya 3. Didefinisikan sebagai namanya test integer 2.
And again, we're going to use the function print to use these variables and use this information. So here, we say print, the year is, this is a string, comma, and test integer 1.
Coba di sini mencoba menggunakan perintah print juga, ya. Dan sebelah kirinya menggunakan tulisan dari the year is, gitu ya. Tapi karena dia teks maka harus pakai kutip ya. Baru di koma, ada koma dengan yang didefinisikan di atas, teks integer 1.
So this shows us how we can combine different variable types in one function. So here we have a string, it's in red, and then we have the integer, which is a variable, but if we look at the variable, it's in blue.
Ya, inilah kemampuan dari ya bahasa programming. Bagaimana kita bisa menggabungkan bagaimana fitur variabel, teks dan integer.
Before we run the script, I'll quickly describe line 35 and line 36. In line 35, we can see that it's possible with integers to do mathematical operations.
Ya, jadi kalau kita lihat di garis baris 35, ya, didefinisikan variabel juga. Bagaimana variabel pada 35 ini, ya, misalnya PHD, END gitu ya, bisa dilakukan operasi matematika. Ini digunakan ya, tambah.
So in this case, we define a new variable called PhD end, and we say that it is equal to test integer 1 plus test integer 2. And if we look back at what those are, 2022 plus 3, you'll see what comes out. And again in line 36, now we say the PhD will be completed by, with a string, and then we add PhD end, which is our new variable. Okay? So let's hit run and see what happens.
Ya, ya, setelah dihasilkan seperti ini, kita di run ya. Nah, ini kelihatannya targetnya Mary tahun 2025 selesai. Oh. I know, I guess this is your hope, ya. The targeting
Yes.
you finish.
On the screen, I have to follow it now.
Okay. Press your slide. Okay. Complete by, yeah.
So we can see that the mathematical operations work, right? So 2022 plus 3, it shows up here. So we just created this new variable that is the combination of two other variables, which is also why variables are quite useful. We can do a lot with them. Okay, ready? I hope that it's enough time for everybody online. A quick shortcut, just for you to remember, is that you can change the name of the variables, and you can make it shorter. So I have quite long variable names to be descriptive, test integer 1, 2. You can just say A equals 2022, B equals 3, then it's much faster to code.
Ya, itu ini kenapa panjang supaya dia mudah dipahami ya. Jadi nama variabel itu bisa dipendekin, bisa A atau B saja.
We could also practice that. This might be useful. So yeah, let's try that. Everybody take test integer 1 and instead type A. And test integer 2, instead type B.
Ya, coba dibuat pendek dengan A dan B.
Variable A, B.
And remember, for our consistency, we have to keep this following.
Ya,
So,
karena di atas sudah dirubah, di bawah sudah dirubah.
Udah otomatis itu Prof ya?
Enggak otomatis. Kalau waktu definisikan tidak otomatis. Kecuali nanti waktu kita bisa menggunakan
Harus fokus itu supaya jangan sampai jangan sampai nggak dikasih data.
Ya, tapi kalau suatu saat programming sudah selesai, kita ingin mengganti namanya, file electric.
So remember that test integer 1, it does not exist now. We did not define it. So we also have to put A here.
Coba juga diganti A.
Okay, same thing below. On line 35, PhD end is now A plus B.
Sama juga di rumus juga diganti dalam rumus variabelnya PHDN.
And when we run the code, we get the same answer.
Jika kira hasilnya sama.
So this can be very useful for those joining online who are typing as we go. you can do these shortcuts. You can make simpler variable names. Just make sure you're consistent.
Yang penting konsisten ya.
All right, so let's move on to the next one. It's just a few lines of code. So move the comment section from line 38, or wherever you have it, to line 42.
Sekarang di yang dari 38 dipindahkan ke 42. Ya, dan selesai.
So just 2 extra lines of code, and now we're going to look at the other type of number variable that you can have. And this is when you have numbers after the decimal point. So not year anymore, but diameter or height or things like this.
Nah, berikutnya kita akan mendefinisikan ya angka-angka yang ada desimalnya. Ini definisikan angka desimal yang beberapa digit gitu ya, itu dengan nama float.
And just like integers, when we define a float, there are no floats, and it should be blue.
Ya, jadi sama dengan yang integer, tidak perlu ada tanda kutip.
So I think we can already hit run.
Coba di run.
We are defining the variable test float, and it's 42.159. You can change that number if you want, play around with different things.
Ya. Silakan dicoba, kebetulan menggunakan angka 42 ya, titik 159.
And then we are printing the sentence, that tree has a DBH of 42.159.
Ya, jadi kita sudah melihat bahwa hasil printingnya adalah the tree has a DBH of 42.159.
If you want a bigger tree, you can make it 62. If you want a smaller tree, you can change this number. And every time you click run, you'll see that it changes.
Sudah dirubah, nanti akan otomatis berubah.
The method is not necessary to write variable space block, yeah, again, yeah, to DBH, something like that. Yeah. So basically, the file for integer and non-integer is same. Yeah.
So again, we can make this variable name simpler and shorter. Let's change test float to DBH. So the variable name is now DBH. And we have to remember, well, let's see what happens if we forget.
Ya, jika kita tidak melakukan running, ternyata test float-nya itu tidak ada, maka di hasilnya seperti ini. Ya, jadi sudah menunjukkan line. Jadi ada line 41 seperti programming itu, berarti ada yang belum didefinisikan. Ya. Ya, Mbak Mary ini tapi tadi menyebutkan ada apa tadi test float. Karena kita tahu dalam bahasa programming sebelumnya itu kalau mendefinisikan float harus ada float, Pak. Ada tulisan float, ada tulisan double. Itu kenapa Mbak Mary katakan dari float. Ya, tapi ini di Java, bahasa Java lebih mudah lagi. Ya, tidak perlu mendefinisikan integer sebagai int. Gitu. Kalau zamannya programming saya dulu harus ada int, float, double. Namanya saya. Sekarang Java itu lebih mudah. Ya, tapi ingat untuk bahasa-bahasa programming, kalau bisa kita mengikuti adalah koma itu jangan menggunakan koma ya. Harus selalu.
Apalagi ditulis koma.
Okay.
Alright, we are at the final section of tutorial 1.
Ya, kita selesai di tutorial 1.
Ada nanti semua ini tutorial 1, oke? Oke,
and because we're geospatial analysts, or what we're doing now is geospatial science. And in this field, there's one type of information that is very important, and this is the date. You will use this information to filter later in part 2. And it's just very important, right? We need to know when the data was collected, when the image that we're looking at was generated.
Oh yeah, perhaps you have to explain when you write a variable name, let's say A, in the next line, don't use the same to refer the difference. Yeah.
So we'll come back to dates in a second. First, I'll explain this very important part that Helen just shared. Let's quickly go back to line 30. If you remember in line 30, we said A equals 2022, B equals 3. And then when we add these two together, we see the PhD will be completed by 2025. Now, something very important will happen if we instead say in line 30, A equals 2022, and then right below it we say A equals 3. Now, so that our code runs, let's also add another B. Make it whatever number you want it to be. We'll use 5. Okay? Also, I'm being reminded, the semicolon comes at the end of every line in JavaScript. Just a quick one. Okay, so now let's see what happens when we run this. So remember, A equals 2022, A equals 3. Now,
Jadi membuat variabel itu namanya variabel itu harus unik namanya ya. Ya, kalau kita menggunakan sama, maka dia diambil paling yang terakhir. Ya, gitu. Maka karena itu dalam bahasa orang programmer itu harus menggunakan yang unik, tidak sama dengan yang lain.
And in this case, which you always see with this programming language, and with many, it will take the last part that you define. So if we rewrite at the end of the code, A equals 7, it will also run it this way. Okay, so let's put this back. So we'll remove the second variable B, go back to what we wanted, run, and it's back to what we like. Okay, now let's take the asterisk /*, remove it from line 42, wherever you had it, and add it to line 54.
Ya. Jadi pindahkan ke garis 54.
Right. So, as I mentioned, dates are a very important variable type for geospatial analysis. The way that you can define a date to use in Google Earth Engine is with line 47. Define your variable name, use equals, and then you use this function, which is bold and in purple, called ee.date. If you remember, about an hour ago, when I described everything that you have in Google Earth Engine, you'll remember this docs tab. Whenever you see a function that starts with ee.dot, this means that it is a built-in function of Google Earth Engine. It also means that it is described how to use it in the Docs tab. So, go ahead and click to the Docs tab.
Oke, bisa dipahami ya. Jadi kalau kita mendefinisikan waktu, ya harus menggunakan bahasanya Earth Engine. Ya, jadi itu ada titik day. Sebenarnya itu sudah ada didefinisikan ya. Nah, digunakan aja seperti itu.
Okay, so if we want to learn what this function is and what it's doing, we can go to the docs and you can search
date.
EE.date.
Ya, jika ingin mengetahui lebih dalam, ketik aja itu di dalam doc date. Jadi tahu bahwa ini terhadap date. Cara menulisnya berbagai macam di bawah. Ya, ikutin aja perintah itu nanti. Ada date dalam kurung waktu dan ide adalah apa namanya parameter yang ada dalam.
And just like when we type code, the spelling and the capitalization is very important.
Ya. Pada saat coding, ya perhatikan huruf besar, huruf kecil berbeda ya.
So once we type it, you can see in the middle, under EE.date, we have EE.date again. And when you click on it, you can read what's happening with this function. So it constructs a new date object, and here you can see how to run the code. So here, in parentheses, you put a string. It tells you, what data type that you write. And if you look back at the code, you'll see that it's red. So it is in fact, and it's in quotes, it is a string. And the second part is optional. So now when we look at line 47, you can see we have a string. It's in quotes, it's red, and so this is how we're using this function. Now, it's also very important with Mosaic Engine that you define a date in this way. So first, with the year, then with a dash, then with the month, with a dash, and then the day.
Kita coba menulisnya dengan urutan tahun, bulan, tanggal.
If you want to remember that, you can add a quote, comment. So here we can put 2 slashes and say year, month, day.
Ya, jadi bisa ditambahkan komentar ya, supaya tidak dalam diatasnya berbuka.
In this case, I use an example of January 15th, 2022. You can also change it to today if you would like. So today we would put 2022, then we put the month, so 04, then we put the day, so 02.
Ya, bisa dirubah ya itu ya.
And change it.
Kalau mau juga misalnya nulisnya boleh komentarnya tahun, bulan, tanggal.
We can also run this and then you can see. There's a little bit lines 52, 53, I'll explain in a second, but at least you can see what happens. So you can see here that we are defining the date. And this is what shows when you print it. The type is also date. And it's a specific variable type for viewer attention. And now I'll show the final part of tutorial 1, which is a special function that tells you in milliseconds how much time has passed since January 1st, 1970 to the date that you have specified. And with this, we can see how important variables are.
Jadi mencoba membuat kita menghitung banyaknya waktu sejak 1 Januari tahun 1970.
Yes. So the reason that this time in milliseconds since 1970, I think that this goes back to Landsat.
Landsat, yeah, Landsat 1.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a time that is used in some geospatial analysis. As the time since one of the most important satellite programs. Yeah. And yeah, they count it as 1970 because it's just before the yeah. So yeah, so the way to run this code and get the milliseconds now, since then, is with this date point now function. So we can also print now and just see what now is. You can type print now. Don't forget your semicolon. And if we run the code, we can see that it got the milliseconds since January 1st, 1970. Oh.
Yeah.
That is the official end of tutorial 1. I hope it was valuable for you.
Yeah.
And
Could you explain what now mean? What would its number mean?
Yeah. So this function date.now is a function that constantly updates. So if we were to run this program tomorrow, this number will be higher.
Yeah.
Now.
What does it mean?
It means the milliseconds since 1970. So it is constantly adding more. So, okay, I ran this function a few seconds ago, right? And we have this really big number. And the last 4 digits of this number are 7415. Now, unless if you all clicked this number at the exact same time that I did, or clicked quick run at the exact same time as me, you probably have a different last 4 numbers. So, Liz, can you share what number you have? The last 4 digits? 5563. So it's different. Could you share what are the last 4 digits? Or, yeah, has anybody ran the code? What is it? 61. Yeah, so you can see it's different for all of us. Based on when we run the code, we're going to have different values.
Now you can rerun to get the correct number. Is that right?
So remember here, we had 7415. If I run it again, now we have 2573. It changes. It's constantly updating.
Ya, jadi now itu sesungguhnya adalah fungsi sesungguhnya nanti bisa angka itu akan dikonversi menjadi sekarang jam berapa, sekarang tanggal berapa, gitu. Tapi di bahasa programmingnya menghasilkan angka. Tapi yang berubah biasanya tiap putaran itu adalah ya. Nanti pada akhirnya akan mencari sekarang tanggal berapa. Ini angka awalnya apa mentahnya.
So great. This was the longest tutorial and the slowest tutorial, I think. The rest of them will go faster, but to keep some energy in the crowd, I brought some snacks with me from Germany.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
So,
supaya gak capek katanya, coba selain menikmati manisnya mari, jadi mari menikmati merasakan ini.
They will only get if they don't have an error in the code.
Supaya nggak salah katanya dalam codingnya. Ya.
So I'll pass it around. Please take one and continue.
Silakan ambil satu-satu katanya.
Jangan 2, 1.
Sorry for the online participants. And if we run out, I have a second package. So no problem.
Masih ada paket yang lain ya dari Mary. Silakan.
Bisa lanjut ke tutorial 2.
Fungsi dari year mountain itu apa? Karena saya lihat hasilnya sama saja, hanya menjalani.
Ya, jadi ya Kirani kan sekarang fungsinya itu kan mencari bulan, ya, tahun sama hari. Ya, now itu sekarang memang angkanya begini, ya. Tapi now nanti kalau kita print dengan format bit akan menjadi 2022 04
kedua juga. Karena now itu sekarang itu ya tanggal itu kan tanggal 2 April. Gitu. Jadi kalau now-nya itu cuma besok ya nanti saya baca. Ya. Iya. Ini bukan keterangan ini, keterangan aja itu. Itu yang paling kanan itu kan ya keterangan aja bisa ditulis tahu apa aja boleh. Dari program membuat itu ya.
But I can write this month, date and year. It is quite
The question is the meaning of them. Yeah, the meaning of this digit number. So it is better to print out in the date format. Yeah. Ya, itu baru angka ibaratnya nanti kita formatnya.
Ini untuk lebih menunjukkan variasi apa fungsi ya yang ada di DF.
So, the most important part before we move to tutorial 2 is to save. Don't forget to save. Okay, so save your tutorial 1. When you save it, it goes from black to gray. And then you're ready to make a new script. Okay. Okay, so let's make a new script.
Coba sekarang membuat script baru.
To do this, go to the script tab, new, file. Tutorial 2. Remember, if you have multiple paths, to select the right one. Okay? And then, tutorial 2. And click OK. For me, again, I will drag it into the right folder. And when you click, it should be empty. Okay. So, look has suggested that instead of copying from the text file for tutorial 2, no?
Whatever the easy one.
Okay, so hopefully everyone has a new script. And that it's where you want it to be.
Kita kayak tadi ya. Ini harus disimpan,
If, when you're creating the new script, if you have a typo, it's really easy to fix. All you have to do is hover over that script, click this second button, which is rename, and then you can change it to what you like. Just hit enter.
Tadi kan copy paste. Ya, kita kontrol C, kontrol V, kontrol A. Oh, ini membuat yang baru. Membuat baru. Ini kan
saya udah buat ini file baru. Ini namanya.
In this process, we might have again been reminded how important it is to save and then create a new file. Remember, if you don't do that, you can lose it all.
Spire.
Oh, apa? Jangan nama. Itu yang pertama aja kan, just open and copy paste. Iya.
Just open. Control C, Control A, Control C, and Control B.
Okay, so once we created this new script, we can go back to our folder, open tutorial 2. You can see it's much smaller than tutorial 1, so it will be easier.
Control A.
Copy with Control C. Go to the script and click Control. And save.
Tadi kan ada simpan. Tadi kan sudah kosong ya. Tadi kosong ya.
To give a quick preview of what you're going to create, we're going to make a map. So the map that you see on the screen, you will create when you're done with this. So, is everybody ready? You can give a thumbs up if you're good to move on. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so let's start. Okay, so we have tutorial 2, creating a simple map.
Jadi kita akan membuat peta.
In tutorial 1, we learned about strings, about integers, about floats, and about dates. But we're geospatial scientists. So to us, we care about images, and we care about maps. So this is another very important data type in Google Earth Engine that we're going to get to work with this tutorial. Just like before, we have this entire code commented out. So the first step is to take is to cut the slash asterisk from line 5 and move it to 14.
Ya, pindahkan tanda triknya ke dari
Kembali 14.
So now it's not all green, but we get some purple, we get some red, we get some blue. And already from the first tutorial, we've learned a lot about what we're seeing on the screen. So we have comments, we have variables, variable names, we have functions. We have another Earth engine function. Remember, we know because it has dot image.
Ya, jadi kita akan menggunakan fungsi setelah pemekaran menggunakan image.
So for those joining online, you can type line 10 into your script. Bar test image equals dot image, and then type exactly what you see here.
Ya, silakan coba menggunakan membuat variabel dengan nama test image. Ya, sama dengan kemudian tulis persis image. Ya, kemudian
inside the parentheses, you will type in all caps
ini semuanya di kapital ya.
IAR/SRT_V4.
Ya, silakan gunakan kapital. Kalau persis seperti itu. Ya.
I hope for everyone joining at home that this is working.
Ya,
If you want more information about the dot_image function, remember that you have the docs tab, and you can type it in there. And you look. You have to scroll a bit for this one. But if you scroll, you can find it.
Ya, jika melihat di docs, kan seperti itu ada penjelasannya ya tentang image.
So you can always use the docs when you use built-in functions to get more information.
Ini dibuka jika ingin mendapatkan informasi lebih jelas.
Now, what is in parentheses, this long series of numbers and letters that I read out, this is one of the open source data sets available on Google Earth Engine.
Jadi apa yang ada dalam tanda kutip ini adalah salah satu data open source yang disiapkan oleh Google Earth. Itu ada paling akhir kan ada SRTN udah tahu semua ya. Kait dengan topografis.
If you want more information on what this data is, you can copy this long string, CGIAR, paste it into the search bar, hit enter, and you can see what data we're going to load.
Ya, kita ingin mendapatkan informasi lebih jauh, copy aja tadi. Terus searching.
So we are going to be loading information.
Ya, jadi SRTN kan adalah standar data topography mission yang digunakan program.
So this is a elevation data set.
Ini adalah data elevation model.
Elevation model. We can get the description, the bands, the terms of use, all of this information.
Ya, ini ada ada resolusinya. Nah, ini resolusinya nanti yang digunakan adalah resolusi 90.
It also gives you an example of the code that you can write to use this data. So ee.image, you can see that this is what we have posted in our script. And this is also very common with any data set that you want to use. We'll explore this more in part 2, but you often get examples of how to write the code to use this data.
Ya, jika menggunakan data-data dari Google Engine biasanya selalu disertai dengan fungsi-fungsi yang dicari.
Okay, so let's use it. We have a variable that we defined that now includes that entire data set. And we want to look at this data set in Lorelei.
Jadi kita ingin melakukan zoom in, memperbesar lokasi di Lorelei.
So if you use Google Earth Engine regularly, you will be very familiar with this function on line 13. Map with capital M dot set center.
Jadi kalau kita menggunakan Google Engine, berarti kita akan sangat familiar ya dengan fungsi ini. Jangan lupa fungsinya juga harus seperti itu ya, ditulisnya M-nya besar, kemudian MAP kecil, kemudian titik set C-nya harus besar.
This is how you tell Google Earth Engine where you want to be in the world and how closely you want to zoom in.
Ya, jadi ingin mengetahui di mana koordinat ya. Jadi sesungguhnya tengah itu koordinat.
Yeah. So if you remember from my presentation yesterday, Lorelei sits at 120 east and at -1 or 1 degree south.
Tahu ya. Jadi lokasi pusatnya Lorelei ada pada koordinat. Ini koordinat geografis ya. Boleh, nanti aja sih. Boleh artis juga bisa. Kalau kita buat add di artis kan ada, ya, frame, add, kemudian langsung otomatis pakai deriving.
Now you're going to notice that I also have decimal points. So I don't have 120 minus 1, but I have 120.1434. I didn't come up with this number myself, but I used the inspector tab, which we'll get some practice with in a second. The value of 9 shows the zoom level.
9 itu menunjukkan tingkat zoom.
So, you can click run.
Kita klik run.
And hopefully you recognize what we're looking at now.
Yeah.
So here's Palu, where we are.
Nah, ini senternya tadi seperti yang tadi, koordinat tadi ya. Nah, kita sudah ada, kita ada di Palu ya.
So
tadi kan lokasinya di Lorelei. Pertanyaan saya, apakah misalnya yang zoom in-nya itu bisa dirubah ke kampus?
Oh, bisa.
Koordinatnya.
Bisa. Tahu nggak koordinat kampus apa? Berapa?
Maksudnya dirubah di script.
Oh, bisa. It is possible to change the equation to the coordinate into the center into the campus.
Yeah, exactly. So let's do that. I think that's a great example.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bagus.
Let's play around with what we have, right? We have our first map on the screen, and yeah, we can do a lot with this already. So we can zoom in, we can zoom out, and we can even change where the map centers when we press run. Before I change any part of the code, if you ever zoom out and you get lost and you're not in Indonesia anymore, but you're in Chicago or something like this, you just click run again, and it resets you. So you can zoom in, zoom out, go to the other side of the world. If you click run, you're back where you started.
Ya, jadi artinya kalau kita pada saat sudah melihat seperti ini, zoom out, atau mungkin salah geser, tiba-tiba kita di Chicago, ada di Frankfurt gitu kan, tapi supaya kita mengembalikan ke yang tadi, klik aja run.
I mentioned the inspector tab and how I knew what values I should put for the coordinates. So, if we want to change to the campus, we're in Palu. I think the campus is about here, right? Everybody go to your inspector tab.
Jadi untuk tahu kita koordinat Palu, koordinat kota kampus bisa ke tabnya inspector.
So you see that the inspector tab says click on the map to inspect the layers. So you can click anywhere. I'll click here.
So klik di situ, nah dapat koordinatnya, ya. Jadi dapat lat longnya, tentang bujurnya.
So we get a lot of really useful information
Jadi
from this
dapatkan,
inspector
nah
tool.
kebetulan di sini kalau kita lihat zoomnya lebih besar ya, 11 kali. Ini kan 9 ya.
So we have the longitude, which is a little bit less than the center of longitude. We're now at 119.8. The latitude is a little bit closer to the equator. So we're at minus 0.72. And we even know the zoom level.
Ya.
So we're zoomed in more. We're at 11, not 9.
Apa beda level zoom?
Ya tadi kan kita Mary tadi melakukan zoom tadi.
Saya punya 15 di sini.
Ya, oh iya, kan di situ beda, geser-geser nggak tadi?
Nah, itu kan beda.
Beda zoomnya, beda ini.
Dia kan zoom 11 mungkin situ
So the reason that I put 9 is that the lower Vindu part is very big.
Spektornya itu
Yeah.
15.
Iya, kan di itunya ada geser-geser nggak tadi? Ah, kalau kita geser sedikit saja, kita akan berubah, pasti. Karena kita nggak sadar, ya, semakin kita berubah geser, zoom in, zoom out, maka ukuran pixelnya akan berbeda, level zoomnya berbeda. Pasti ininya juga beda kan? 76, sekiannya beda kan? Ya, itu karena itu sebelah kanan itu adalah approximately meter per pixel artinya.
Yeah. Okay. So now what we can do, if we don't want to be centered on lower Vindu, but we want to know what's happening here in Palu, we can change line 13 of the code. So we can do that.
Coba kita rubah di garis 13 ya.
So I'm going to highlight the longitude,
Ya, copy.
just the first few. We
Yeah.
don't need the whole thing.
Jadi copy 3 sampai 3 angka sedikit terakhir. Copy dari situ, masukkan ke
So I copy, erase the longitude on line 13, and paste the
Jadi
new
copy
one.
paste aja. Iya, copy paste 3 di kita bagus.
Same thing with the latitude. So you can copy
Copy.
from the inspector
Yeah.
minus 0.7, whatever you
Yeah.
have. Copy. And paste.
Ya.
And you can even change the zoom. Let's see what happens when we put 12.
Ya.
Now if we run,
Ya,
we're a
beda
little
kan
bit
ya.
closer now.
Jadi semakin besar angka zoomnya, dia akan lebih skalanya akan menjadi lebih besar.
And for those joining online, and for those in the room, you can play around with this. Wherever you want to be in the world right now, zoom in, zoom out, use the inspector tool. If you want to look at Germany, if you want to look at South Africa, you can be anywhere. So, let's go to Chicago. I think my hometown is on the complete other side of the world.
You back home, Chicago. Wow.
Okay. So, if we look at the inspector tab for Chicago, what is it?
Jadi kalau mudik bisa online gini mudiknya nanti.
$41.855.
When I'm in Chicago, if I zoom back somewhere else, and I click run, it will always bring me back.
Yeah, it is better.
Walaupun kita masih nggak bisa lagi geser-geser, cuma dipindah-pindahin. Yang pertama kali
That's great. So there's one other feature that I want to share with you now, and it's that right now we're looking at the map. But you also can very quickly switch to the satellite image. So if we want to see what Chicago actually looks like, all you have to do is go to the mid-right corner. You have map and you have satellite. So click satellite, and now you can really see what Chicago looks like. Or Palu, or wherever you decide.
Ya.
Saya mau tanya, bagaimana terkait tadi Prof yang misalnya terkait koordinat yang kita ambil misalnya dari mana itu dimasukkan di sini. Nah, saya coba ambil koordinat di GPS map HP itu saya masukkan di sini, datanya di laut, padahal seharusnya di tas atau itu.
Saya khawatir ininya GPS-nya tidak ada.
Kemarin saya habis
Gitu ya. Coba, ininya nggak adanya Pak. Pak nggak? Pakai apa ini? Ya. Ya, ingat ini yang kita gunakan adalah koordinat geografi, ya, bukan UDN. Geografi tingkat kita di belakang utara. Tadi didemonstrasikan juga bagaimana menampilkan tadi dari peta ke satelit, tinggal ngeklik ke satelit.
Okay. So hopefully you were trying out different options and writing new coordinates and new zoom levels, anything like that. If you want to get reset so that you are going to end up with the same final product that you see here, you can recopy from the text file coordinates from 2. So you can reset if you want.
Jika sudah terlanjur ditulis, kembali lagi ke copy dari tutorial tadi ya.
Or just, go back. Or you can also leave it at your new location. Okay. So now, if you're ready for the next step, take the comment, move it from line 14 and put it to line 17.
Ya, jadi kita ini pindahkan ya ke baris 17.
So right now we're looking at the map, and we already showed how we can go to the satellite image. But remember about the data that we loaded before. We loaded this elevation data. We have it as a variable, test image, and we want to look at it. We want to see the elevation change in Northern. The way that we look at this data is with another very important function that if you use Google Earth Engine will become very familiar to you. This is map.add_layer.
Jadi sama seperti lihat sekarang kita kan menambahkan layer ya. Nah, menambahkan layer fungsinya dengan add layer. Tapi karena di sini engine harus ada add layer.
Within the parentheses, we put our variable, which was test image.
Jadi menggunakan nama variabel yang sudah didefinisikan.
And when we click run, we see the data.
Ya, kita dapatkan display datanya.
So, we loaded the data into Google Earth Engine, and now we can see it. If you have different coordinates, it might look a little bit different, but right now, it looks great. So, it's not so impressive yet. It's not so useful yet. So, we're supposed to be looking at elevation. We can see some change. Actually, if you look very closely, there's actually some areas that are darker gray, some areas that are lighter gray, but it's not so useful as it is now.
Ya, belum kelihatan gradasinya ya, baru sama-sama.
But we have a way to change that.
Kita bisa ubah.
So now I'm going to ask you to move the comment from line 17 to
Kita pindahkan lagi komennya. Pindahkan lagi.
21.
Sampai 21.
And what you see in these lines of code are a bit more information to specify how you want to change the color or change the stretch of how we visualize the data.
Jadi ini kita akan lakukan stretching namanya, ya. Ini stretching. Supaya tadi kan tidak di stretching. Jadi gradasinya kita sekarang tambahkan dua fungsi namanya map dan layer, ya, untuk menampilkan stretchingnya tadi supaya jelas kelihatan.
Yeah. So many. Hello. Those of you who have used ArcGIS or QGIS, you'll know that there's a button that you click to stretch. Here we just write this line of code. So what we're doing in line 19, we're taking the same image, adding a layer, but we're specifying the minimum value and the maximum value. What we do in the line after that is that instead of having a grayscale, we add colors. So let's run it. Takes a little bit of time, okay. But for those who already see.
Ya, jadi fungsi ini, fungsi yang nomor 19 itu adalah untuk menentukan nilai yang tentang nilai yang terkecil sampai yang terbesar. Nah, ini menunjukkan elevasi ya. Elevasi.
Now, we added 3 layers to the map. We have the original one that is gray, we have the stretch, and we have the colorful one.
Ya, jadi yang pertama, jadi sesungguhnya dalam display ini sudah ada 3 fungsi ya. Fungsi pertama di display dengan apa adanya yang belum di-stretch. Yang kedua setelah di-stretch, tadi sebelum ini ada yang grayscale, yang derajat keabu-abuan. Kemudian fungsi yang terakhir ini yang belum. Dan menggunakan fungsi tadi palet tadi green yellow.
So we can add these layers and remove these layers as we want to see different things with this layers tab. So right next to map and satellite we have layers.
Jadi sama dengan fungsi-fungsi yang sudah ada di aktif ya. Jadi kita dari 3 fungsi itu bisa kita hilangkan juga. Tidak aktifkan dan aktifkan. Check and uncheck yang
so just check and uncheck, and you can see the differences. So from this, which was completely gray, not useful, not telling us anything at all, to this, we have a big change.
Ya, jadi ingat yang paling bawah yang namanya layer 1 kan, layer yang baru dipanggil tuh. Yang kedua, custom visualization itu adalah yang sudah stretching. Yang paling atas, yang warnanya diganti.
You can also notice that the first layer that we added, it's just called layer 1. But the rest have custom visualization, custom palette. If you look back at your code, this comes from what we typed in here. So when you use map.addLayer, you can get more information in the docs on exactly what you can specify. But this is a great example here. So we can change this to grayscale or stretch. Stretch?
Yeah, stretch.
We click run again. And in the layers tab, you can see that the name has changed.
Jadi yang paling akhir thread itu adalah nama layer yang kita buat. Ya, kalau tadi kan namanya custom ya, tadi ya visualization. Itu diganti dengan thread. Maka di sini di tab ini, ya, itu kan kelihatan menjadi stretch yang dirubah ya. Itu nama ininya, nama layer. Sama juga kalau kita di artis ya, kita double klik kan ya, bisa rename ya, tampilan sama persis.
And the last piece that I will share for this tutorial is that everything that you see up here in these lines of code can be changed. And it also shows us how important it is to know information about your study site. So when I was writing this code, or actually when I was modifying a code that already existed, I knew that the values of 0 and 2,500 were appropriate to use because I know that Lori Hindu has a maximum elevation of 2,525.
Ya, kenapa angka 2.500 digunakan? Karena memang di sini tahu bahwa si Mary itu sudah mempelajari bahwa ketinggian dari area yang dicakup oleh ini adalah mulai dari 0 dpl sampai dengan 0. Ini bisa dirubah angka itu, ya. Tapi kalau dirubah nanti konsekuensinya ada saturasi. Kalau kita misalnya paling tinggi, misalnya nanti dijadikan 1.500, nanti yang 1.500 apa akan jadi merah aja? Kita nggak tahu.
So if we change this from 0 to 500,
kalau dirubah misalnya,
and we run again, the information that we get is much less useful to us in custom palette.
Ya, jadi nggak ada gradasi lagi kan? Jadi yang di atas 500 up dan biar merah. Tadi ada loss of information, jadi ada informasi yang hilang. Ya.
Some mixture of having information about your study site and also just trying it out.
That history classification is really how about 5 classification?
Yes, you can also do that, and this depends on the palette that you use. So in this case, I have specified a palette with 3 colors. So with green, with yellow, and with red. And that's why you can see the different colors show up. One first point to note is that it doesn't have to be green, yellow, red. You can change those values. You can make it orange, you can make it white, whatever you like. I went with this because I thought it shows a quite nice map. But yeah, definitely play around with it. Change the names, change the colors, see what happens.
Ya, jadi ini bisa dimainkan. Ya,
Now, what we are also
ini hanya menunjukkan color, warna saja. Ya, belum kelas ketiga dulu.
What we also see is that already when we compare line 20, the custom palette, with the stretch palette, it's already differences, right? Well, the stretch palette is a grayscale, but the custom palette has 3 different groups. If we want to add another one, let's try blue.
Blue.
So I'm going to put blue first.
Blue, green.
Remember, so it should be in quotes, and if you type it correctly, it should be red. Okay. Let's see what happens when we run this. I did not try it. That's great.
Ya, jadi yang paling rendah kelihatan.
Oh, nanti diurut berdasarkan paling rendah ke yang tinggi.
Iya.
Nilainya ya.
Iya, ikutin kaidah kartografi ya. Jangan dibalik. Ya, nanti kalau kaidah kartografinya misalnya puncaknya biru kan aneh. Ya, kita kan ikutin kartografi ya. Ya.
Yeah, exactly. So now we see four veins. I have not tried yet, but I think as an alternative to writing blue, green, yellow, and red,
Wrong.
you can also use different codes. That's, yeah, these are common codes to show different values. Yeah, so there's another way to refer to colors with a hexadecimal code. Yeah, you might be familiar with this. So for now, I'm just showing when you type it. But if you want different colors, like a pink color or dark green or whatever, yeah, pink, you can find this decimal code and type it in.
Mau bikin batik di print.
Okay, so let's just show another option that we have. So let's go ahead and add another layer. You can first copy line 20 and paste it. And now for the palette, instead of blue, oh, okay. Okay, yeah, no problem. Okay. But what we can try instead are these codes. So, so I opened a new tab, and let's look up the hexadecimal code.
Yeah, there is a question, Mary. The meaning of the color. Yes, you might describe. Yeah, the meaning of the color.
Yeah.
It is defined equally or based on frequency. Yeah, the color ranging from the dark blue, the red. Yeah.
Now it's equal intervals.
Yeah. Jadi equal interval.
Yeah.
Kita belum tahu ya di sininya dia sometimes dia apa namanya melakukan otomatis rasakan equal frekuensi apa equal interval ya kan gitu ya
Default, termasuk default algorithm.
ya kita harus tahu gitu algoritmanya.
So now I'm quite curious if we can use these hexadecimal codes instead of typing the number, which, yeah, I will try.
Yeah, this one is much better. Yeah, I usually got like this one.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, if you have done geospatial science, you should be, yeah, probably quite familiar with the fact that every color that we have has a code associated with it. So instead of typing red or tomato or coral, you can type FF0000, and then you also get red. And to my understanding, we can also use this here. So instead of red, let's see what happens when we type FF0000. I don't know if this will work, so let's see. And run. So if it works, these two should be the same. We will take a lunch break after this. It's good news. And so if we check on and off with the two different palettes, you can see it's exactly the same. And if we want tomato instead of red, we can type 634247. 6347. And it will also work, and it will be slightly different. A slightly different color. So
Mary, could you also possible to display with RGB? The most right one. Yeah. Yeah.
So if we toggle between these, you can see there's a slight difference in the colors. So tomato is not so red as red.
So before we go to the lunch break, I think we should give applause to Mary. It's interesting, I also work with the Google Earth Engine, but I never had an introduction like this. I always tried by my own, but today I even learned also some new things. Very interesting. And we also saw that it takes a little bit longer than expected, but I think it is important. And that's why after the lunch break we will go on, which means you are eating up my time for the QGIS, but I think this is very important and very useful. And if you remember, everybody of you who has worked with an elevation model before, you know that the amount of data is huge. It's a huge data set, probably more than 1 gigabyte, but it's very fast. It gets a little bit slowly at the end if you like to download the data. So this is also possible, but this will take a little bit longer because the amount of data is very large. But now let's have a break and refresh.
Before the break, be sure to save. Save your code.
Ya, jangan lupa menyimpan ya.
Never forget to save.
Oke, baik. Thank you again, Mary. Mari kita berikan big applause to Mary again. Panitia sampai jam berapa kita break?
1.30. Ya, sesuai jadwal kita akan break sampai jam 1.30 waktu Indonesia bagian tengah.
Not too long? Because we Mary already banyak.
Sampai jam 1 aja kali.
Iya.
Jam 1.
Nanti kita jam 1 lebih cepat.
Oke. Ya, baik. Kalau jam 1 kita mulai di sini ya. Makanya kalau sana. Kalau sana ya.
Jam 1. We will have at 1. So many participants is impressed with your work. Great. Yeah.
Oke Bapak Ibu sekalian, kita akan kembali lagi pada jam 1 waktu Indonesia tengah. Bagi Bapak Ibu sekalian yang ingin keluar atau tetap stay di Zoom, kami persilahkan. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu sekalian telah sempat hadir. di Zoom meeting ini. Kita kembali jam 13.00 atau jam 1 siang.
Let's go,